Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Money Matters podcast, the show where we discuss important financial topics that were never covered in med school. I'm your host, Dr. Tarang Patel. Okay, this is part 2 of my interview with Dr. Westby Fisher about the convoluted backstory of the American Board of Internal Medicine MOC process. It's an amazing story and frankly really boggles the mind of most of us, the stories that you're hearing here. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I encourage you to do so, and you can find the link on the show notes. And here we go with part 2 with Dr. Westby Fisher. You had kind of briefly alluded to this before, but we're talking. You mentioned the as you call the medical cartel. The medicine and surgical subspecialty boards, the hospitals, insurance, kind of are all together. I guess my question is, how is this is this like an organized effort, or is this just something that because everyone preaches quality, it seems to be kind of an amalgam that's kind of come together, and no one is against quality. Or are you seeing that this is kind of more than we know, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit?
Well, it's I think that to understand the full depth and breadth of this, we really it goes much deeper than any of us can imagine. Realize that healthcare today in the United States is $20 trillion. It's the largest industry. It takes up 20% of our gross national product in the United States. I mean, it's big money. Okay. And we've got, doctors, hold a lot of keys for, industry, and controlling the market, controlling prices, is big business. And for third parties, that skim, monies kind of covertly in the background, this can be multi-billion dollars of revenue for those companies. Just for instance, Premier Incorporated, that is the largest group purchase organization for hospitals, is valued on the stock market at about $4 billion just there. And if you look at something like Blue Cross Blue Shield, well, I don't even know how big that is, but it's monstrous, right? So, we're looking at, huge sums of money, huge power, huge influence, huge, manipulations that even small things can have big repercussions as far as pricing is concerned. So, suffice it to say, there's been a move afoot. Many of the people in the American Board of Internal Medicine probably want single payer, would be my bet, and believe wholeheartedly that the government can manage many of these things better. Christine Cassell was a right-hand person to Hillary Clinton, was quite politically active in that regard, wanted very much to be politically active. And while she was at a 501(c), which is not supposed to be politically active, she was on the President's Council of Advisors for Science and Technology under President Obama. So that's how high this mess goes. We had people at the ABIM who were capable on the board of Premier Incorporated, capable of manipulating markets with group purchase organizations for America's hospitals. Every person in internal medicine must sign a HIPAA Business Associate Addendum when they sign up for maintenance of certification. And who gets access to that data but none other than a small subsidiary of Premier Incorporated called CE City. And you can Google it right now and look at it on your computer, and you will see that there is a HIPAA Business Associate Addendum for everybody who participates in maintenance of certification. And it's included as part of your quote-unquote contract that you must agree to when you sign up for maintenance of certification. They are selling your data. Okay. And that is really what maintenance of certification and all these practice improvement modules are about. They want to know the caliber of physician. They're using this as a surrogate for quality for a physician. They are selling that information to pharmaceutical companies. They're selling it to these group purchase organizations. They are selling all kinds of information about you, including ABIM has all your Social Security numbers. All of that information is potentially going to these people. We don't know the depth and breadth of the collusion at this point. But I can tell you right now that the money trail is there. Realize the American Board of Medical Specialties, okay, there was a Dr. Thomas Brem from Johns Hopkins University in 1964 who was paid by the tobacco industry to testify that tobacco didn't hurt people. Okay, and was actually named in the final indictment when the Department of Justice ended that collusion back in 2012. So the ABMS has a long history of colluding with large industry. And unfortunately, I think they've gotten kind of caught with their hand in a cookie jar on this one as well. And we have every intention that we're going to find out exactly how deep this goes because physicians are actually being harmed by maintenance of certification.
What you're describing seems, almost implausible. When you think about, you're describing the people that we look up to take care of, the educational needs and the policies and things that lead our specialties or our profession as a whole. And what you're talking about, just it almost seems, just unfathomable. Why do you think that physicians themselves, I've read your blog intermittently, in talking with colleagues, we're annoyed at the MOC. Many of us don't feel like our dues that we pay to our specialty organizations or to the, if they even pay dues to the AMA, represent us. Why do you think physicians haven't really made as big of a deal about this process? It just sounds, what you've described is it should make everyone extremely angry.
Well, I think what happens and what has happened, the business of taking care of patients, the very hard work of taking care of patients, is really all consuming when you're on the front line taking care of somebody who's sick. When you have to worry about, how you bill, what code do you use to put with what billing so that you can get paid by an insurance company. Those things, you just kind of feel beat up after you have to do 5,000. There's only 75,000 codes out there. And, if they don't match the right way, they can deny your payments. And so you've got to learn all this other kind of just worthless stuff on top of what you're trying to do. But why do they do that? They do that to obscure the money and who's getting paid. Realize all those codes are made by the American Medical Association. They have copyright on those codes. For every procedure in medicine, there is a AMA copywritten CPT code that we have to enter. And all of the electronic medical record companies must pay the AMA for the use of those codes, since that's the only standardized coding system that's out there for procedures in the United States. And then you've got all these other groups who are just, salivating at getting doctors to write orders or to understand where the money flow is going in hospitals, how the insurance companies are dealing with hospitals. They all kind of work a deal in the back room to make sure that the patient doesn't know how much money is being being kind of shifted between all these different entities. Patients just don't want to pay anything if they can avoid it, which is understandable. But our prices are above anything anybody else does, really, because we don't know what anything costs. It's kind of like going to a grocery store, walking out with a full cart of groceries, okay, and then receiving a bill, 2 weeks down the road for what you walked out with, and they can just kind of make it up, and there's no way to verify anything. So, that's part of the problem. So I think that this really is big. And so why don't physicians care? Just getting back to your original question, I think the bottom line is this is learned helplessness. We have really become numb to all of the things that have been heaped upon our shoulders. We feel like we're just completely powerless to be able to change this monstrous system that is developed over the years without really regard to what it takes to be a doctor. And frankly, we've been taken advantage of, and we know it. And I think that people are beat up. We have the highest suicide rate now of just about any profession out there. People go into medicine with the best of intentions, and then they find out the realities of what's lurking behind the curtain, when we're taking care of patients, and all of a sudden things don't look so rosy. They're saddled with huge debt from medical school that they have to pay back and see no easy way to do so. We're getting replaced with nurse practitioners and ancillary care providers because they're cheaper for the large hospitals to employ. And you've got family practice and pediatrician peoples who've studied, years and years and years to learn their trade, and being replaced by a nurse practitioner that might have a 1 or 2 year degree that she's gotten online and never stepped foot in front of a patient. So that's what we're up against. Okay. It's the business.
Yeah, it's the business. It's absolutely right. And that's what's interesting about what we're describing here is that, on the one hand, our organizations, our leaders are making us do additional hoops to prove that, quote, prove that we are competent, educated. And on the flip side, you have hospitals or insurance companies or corporations, whatever, hiring mid-level providers because they're cheaper. And so, it's exactly, you're getting, pushed from both sides. There's the million other things that you just described that we're having, causing burnout. You're right, and issues. And I think you're right. We physicians, especially the later, I would say the most recent generation of physicians in the last 10, 15 years, it just seems like, they come into med school probably as eager as any generation in the past, probably, as well qualified, if not better qualified, just from a sheer academic standing than anyone in the past. But by the time they get out of residency, and certainly if they do a long fellowship, they're just beat down and they're looking to retire. I see it so often on the various social media groups that I'm a part of, even on my own Facebook group, people talking about, what do I need to do to retire? And they're in their 30s and you're just getting out. So, it's unfortunate that we've developed this learned helplessness, but we have to fight it. And so let's talk about what you and your colleagues are doing to help fight this process.
Well, after it was very clear that there was a lot of tax fraud and there was a lot of conflicts of interest that have never been disclosed in any of the medical journals, I started writing about it, and you kind of meet companions across the United States who feel similar to the way you do, and really care about our profession and want to try and get it back to something that's a little bit more attentive to a practicing physician's needs. And so Dr. Marion Mass, who is a pediatrician out of Philadelphia, and myself, along with 4 other really motivated people, decided that we would get together and create an organization that was specifically geared to represent the practicing physicians' needs and concerns. And so we called it Practicing Physicians of America, a real original name, but it worked. And we, registered that name and created a website and did all that kind of stuff. And we met just almost every weekend. We'd be on a phone conference. But this really came out of a lot of people's desire to maybe have a new voice in medicine that really did keep the doctor-patient relationship at the forefront of what we were about. And we wanted it very much to be a nonpartisan group. We wanted it to be all physicians, not just, right-leaning or left-leaning physicians. Really our priority was to be as a spokesperson for doctors, period, that really took care of patients and not the bureaucratic physicians that many of these larger institutions have become with staid old guard techniques. We did not want to look like we were from the dark ages and the good old boy network of internal medicine, and we didn't want to. We wanted to have a more kind of democratic type way to steer. So because maintenance of certification was such a big deal, most of us rallied around the idea of making this organization, once we decided to make maintenance of certification our first and foremost project to attack. And we knew that it was corrupt. We had all kinds of information after years of looking into it. And so we began to kind of collaborate with others and figure out how we might be able to attack this. It has taken me 5 years to try and figure out a way. We've tried everything. We've gone to the AMA House of Delegates, put forth resolutions that insisted that we end MOC in order until we show that it's of value to patient care. We've had resolutions insisting that the ABIM have a full formal audit and present that to the AMA. And basically all we got was a referral to their tax forms on their website. I mean, it was really kind of crazy. And so that didn't work. And then we went ahead and we've gone state to state to try and pass legislation. And everywhere we went, we'd encounter hospital lobbyists or insurance company lobbyists or lobbyists for the American Board of Medical Specialties, and kept banging our heads against the wall because there are physicians who make, a lot of money, consulting for these guys and doing test questions and all that kind of stuff. So there's still plenty of doctors, maybe 10% of them out there, that still think this is a valuable exercise. So you always run into those people and all the state legislators as well, because they have nothing but time because they're not taking care of patients. So, right, exactly. So, yeah. So anyway, after doing all that, we just said, to hell with it. We're going to need to take a different tack. And so I actually it was kind of interesting. A friend of mine, colleague of mine, actually was married to a federal judge, and we had a conversation over dinner, and I handed her I said, I've put together this tax fraud packet of at least discrepancies that I found on all these tax forms, and kind of made it into a little packet. I can't seem to find a law firm in Chicago that isn't tied up with the AMA, because they pretty much use everybody. So they all have conflicts of interest. And she said, well, let me look at it. And, boom, I said, okay, I'll send it to you. Sent it to her. And within 24 hours, it turned around. She goes, oh my God, there's a lot here. And, you've got, this kind of fraud and that kind of fraud and this and that and the other thing. And I said, yeah, I think you're right. She goes, well, I think I might have somebody for you. And she said, this is a pretty smart guy. And, so she referred me to a law firm here in Chicago, and I met with them for a number of hours and really just said, and the lawyer, after we got done, looked at me and said, you can't afford this. And I said, I know. Because, everybody knows this is how they win, right? These guys, I mean, they got more lawyers than you can shake a stick at. And fortunately, we've come up with a plan. I really don't want to go into more things, but let's just say this is going to be about a $10 million lawsuit, probably, if we were to file it. We still don't know if we're going to file at this point, but we're trying to do background research. And what we're doing is pre-litigation investigation and getting expert witnesses to testify on both the fraud angles and the antitrust angles of what has transpired with the American Board of Internal Medicine. That work, the law firm has agreed to do at a reduced rate and actually cap their fees for us. And we're looking at writing 2 complaints on each of those areas of fraud and antitrust. And then if we get those written and they look reasonable, then we will actually vote with the board members of PPA whether we proceed with the filing of those suits. So we are looking at it. This is a very serious effort. We have created a GoFundMe page because, like you say, none of us have that kind of money. But for $150,000, we can do all this and have two very credible claims. And then we hope that with that work, we'll be able to engender some interest and proceed with filing the legal actions if it makes sense to do so. Realize there's another lawsuit that's still pending from a young man in Puerto Rico. The ABIM lost that lawsuit to him. They threatened that he was involved in copyright infringement of their board questions when he was trying to study for his board exam. The ABIM had planted a person in there and secretly tape recorded the attendees at that board review course, brought the information back before a federal judge. One of the people that brought that information before the judge was a felon, and the president and CEO of the ABIM, which was Christine Castle. So all these people got a secret writ to seize, and they were able to go in and seize the computers of this person who was running the board review course, probably ostensibly to monopolize board review courses for their fellow subspecialty societies. But anyway, they took all the computers and then started searching the computers and got everybody's emails that attended that course, and then threatened them all with sanction letters. This is not a nonprofit activity. Okay. This is mafia like, that's going on here. If you've got guys in there raiding homes, taking emails off computers, what kind of people do this? And this is the American Board of Internal Medicine, guys. This is not something that, normal nonprofits should be doing in the United States of America. There are privacy laws that go on here, that just are just kind of thrown to the wind. The civil liberties of physicians were violated so egregiously with this whole process that went on secretly behind everybody's back. And then the ABIM has the testosterone-laden gonads to publish a press release in the Wall Street Journal about how doctors had cheated on their boards. Without any proof, without any due process for those physicians. 139 people were embarrassed with that article, and it's a mess. So we've got to make sure that doesn't ever happen again, and that people who have done this kind of stuff get brought to justice. I really think it's that bad. And so that's why I've taken such a powerful stance against this. I'm not going to let something like that happen in the United States if I can help it. And I think that physicians need to wake up and, instead of being passive and feeling helpless, realize that we are making a very honest and aggressive effort to try and correct what has happened and really prevent it from happening again, and end maintenance of certification nationwide for every subspecialty in medicine. There is nothing. Yeah. So that's where we are.
Good. Well, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a great effort, and I'll definitely put a link up to the GoFundMe page. But what I wanted to ask you, because of your, this aggressive stance that you've taken, it's have you had any, negative professional consequences to you?
Well, it's very interesting. I think my institution, because of my blog presence and social media presence, which is quite substantial, I think that they understand that there could be a huge Streisand effect if they were to lash out at me because of all the work that I've done. And I think that, at least I like to think so. I think that I don't even know the depth and breadth of what could be done. I can tell you that I have had a Wall Street attorney, Sidney Blumenthal, who was really a Democratic kind of operative, accused me of possible slander of, or defamation of this felon that I outed, that worked for the ABIM as the director of test security. There were a lot of sleepless nights with myself and my wife, worrying about what we were going to be doing with this, knucklehead. But then, legally it was obvious this was just a threat and kind of an empty threat at that. But there's no question, I have made a very conscientious effort to protect my assets. I have, I know that I am playing with fire here. I know this is not something that is for the weak and timid. I think that to underestimate the power of these people and the depths that they will go to protect a $2 billion a year enterprise is anybody's, is anybody's guess. And, my family has very much understands this. We have kids, and they know how scary this can be. When I was thinking about doing this, but I felt so strongly that what had been done was wrong that I went ahead and proceeded with them, their understanding, and I've had a huge amount of support with my family. But I don't for a minute think that this is without risk. If I lost my job tomorrow, I could probably go on a consulting gig, right? What the heck? Tell people how to bring down machines. But I think that honestly, social media and the stuff that's out there already will vindicate us. I think that the truth will set us free. And I think that once we get to the bottom of the truth in the court of law, I think we'll have a really good chance. We're doctors, for goodness sakes. I'm not a politician, okay? I don't do political stuff. But I know what's right and I know what's wrong. And I feel very strongly. And part of why I have grown up the way I have is just that, people who do this kind of stuff really, shouldn't be doing it. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen as best I can. I don't want anybody to get hurt that doesn't need to get hurt. That's not my intent. My intent is to clean up the American Board of Internal Medicine, the ABIM Foundation, to end maintenance certification, because the whole thing, I've gone back, looked at the history of it. It's all a ruse. It was all done just to make money for these guys who are running out of money because they started paying themselves a handsome salary. That's literally what happened. And so this little concocted storyline was made up. Unfortunately, it was supported by many of the members of the ACGME. They all stand to make money off of this deal.
Well, there's a lot of overlap, right, between the leaders of those organizations and these different specialty boards. I mean, they kind of go back and forth, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. Well, and they all, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. And there's lots of wine being poured and fancy hotels. I mean, these people are going to the nicest places. Okay. Who wouldn't want that lifestyle, right? I mean, the chairman or the president and CEO of the American Board of Pediatrics, I mean, he had a luxury car collection that would make anybody envious. I mean, it's unbelievable. And he got paid $780,000+ a year to work 8 hours a week for the American Board of Pediatrics after he retired. So, you laugh about this, but it's not funny. I think we're paying for all that. And this is what we're dealing with. And it's really a shame. I mean, it's a sad story, but it's a real story. And I think doctors need to wake up. We need to push back against this as hard as we can. We're only going to get one shot at this. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot more efforts like this being made. But we sure as heck are going to give our best shot. And I think, we're already over 50% funded through that GoFundMe campaign, thanks to a lot of people stepping up. But it's interesting. You were talking about, learned helplessness. This morning, we had about 350 donors. We've had 561 shares on Facebook of this GoFundMe thing. And that has to reach, thousands of doctors. And yet only 300 donors. I'm like, what is going on? And I think people are scared. I think they're fearful that they will be seen as, quote, unprofessional, that they're siding with somebody who's a wacko. Who is this West Fisher guy, and this Practicing Physician of America fly-by-night organization? Who are they? look, I'm like everybody else, and I see patients every day, and we do this in our spare time as best we can. Hell, it's almost 10 o'clock at night here. So, it's not like it's short days, but we feel very motivated. We want to get this campaign done, and then we can move forward when the time is right, and if the time is right, after consulting with a number of other folks to make sure. I think that this could be a huge win for the profession of medicine. I think it's a absolutely necessary thing to clean up what we're dealing with. We've got too many people who are working too hard, taking care of patients, and really are super quality people that are being, sidelined by this whole process needlessly. And we hope to end it.
Well, I agree with you. I want to thank you. I want to, definitely support what you do, and I want to encourage my listeners to do the same. But really, just a hats off to you for fighting the fight, because like you said, you've been doing this for a while, and for you to have the energy to continue this battle, it's impressive. So, thank you. I'm going to put a link to, like I said, the GoFundMe page. I'll put a link to your Twitter profile as well, where they can find and your blog, where they can find a ton more information and background on this. And then basically, I'm also going to encourage the listeners to look up, Dr. Fisher is talking specifically about the ABIM, but I am not, all these boards are extremely valuable and high asset organizations. I just looked up the American Board of Radiology before I did this interview. It's a $50 million organization, and the salaries are very high as well. And I'm not saying I know what's going on there specifically, but it doesn't seem to be much different than what you're describing. They all have, like you said, they're kind of all run from the same circles as well. So,
well, they just got back from their meeting in Maui. I kid you not. So, the American Board of Radiology is got lots of things in the irons in the fire, and I think you just have to. Every single one of these boards has a lot of dirty laundry that needs to be cleaned.
Oh, one thing I did discover while I was looking through that is in a little footnote in the Form 990 was a resolution or something that said one of their incurred expenses will be for companions to travel. So that's always a nice thing, right, to go to Maui? So, well, Dr. Fisher, thank you. I don't want to take too much of your time. It's late in Chicago, but once again, thank you. Okay, thanks for listening to another episode of Dr. Money Matters. I want to thank Dr. Westby Fisher for all the work that he's done in helping physicians become aware of the MOC process. Like I said before, it's a crazy, unbelievable story, and it really boggles the mind that this is happening in our medical fields. I encourage those of you listening to contribute to Dr. Fisher's GoFundMe page, and I'll put a link on the show notes, and help fund this fight. Let's stop this physician-learned helplessness and help take our profession back. In my opinion, the whole MOC process is like a bad, actively managed mutual fund. I don't see any value in the additional layer of management forced upon us, and it's costing us time and dollars while there is no real evidence of improved performance over time. I expect better than this from the academic leaders of our respective fields. What do you think? Let's continue the discussion over at the Dr. Money Matters private Facebook group. I'm going to end the show with another disclaimer. I obviously can't verify the allegations that Dr. Fisher has put forward in this interview and also on his blog, but I encourage you to visit his blog, which I'll link to on the show notes, and follow him on his Twitter account, and you can make your own decision about what you've heard. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Dr. Money Matters. If this is the first episode you have heard, I appreciate you taking the time out and listening, and encourage you to listen to our past episodes. I would also appreciate you leaving me a positive review on Apple Podcasts, and also recommend you join our Facebook group where we have ongoing discussions about this and other topics in order to help each other reach our financial goals. Finally, I encourage you to subscribe to our email list and also to subscribe to the podcast itself on the various podcast app that you use in order to be kept aware when the latest episode comes out. More episodes of this podcast are available at www.drmoneymatters.com and on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Audio versions are also available on YouTube and Facebook. And you can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Money Matters or on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Money Matters, all spelled out. Thanks for listening, and if you get a chance, please leave a positive review for this podcast, as it helps move the podcast up the rankings on iTunes and gets it exposed to a wider audience. Thanks for listening once again, and stay tuned for another episode coming soon.